The night is quiet, but not peaceful. You've felt it, haven't you? That strange stirring in the spirit when everyone else is asleep, as if unseen eyes are watching, unseen energies moving. The air thickens, time slows, and your heart begins to sense something powerful. Chosen one, that's not fear. That's recognition. The darkness knows your name from the very beginning. You were marked with something different, a light to ancient, to divine, to be ignored. When you walk into a room, the spiritual atmosphere shifts. People can't explain it, but they feel it. Some are drawn to you, others recoil. Even before you say a word, something in you exposes what's hidden in them, and that is why demons fear your divine assignment. But listen closely, because this next part will shock you. You were never meant to blend in. You were never meant to be ordinary. Heaven gave you a specific spiritual frequency, one that hell has been tracking since the day you were born. You carry divine instructions in your soul. That's why the attacks weren't random. The losses weren't coincidence. Every betrayal, every heartbreak, every lonely season, they were calculated moves to make you question your purpose. Because if the darkness could confuse your identity, it could delay your destiny. But here's the secret most never learn: demons don't attack the weak, they stalk the powerful. They follow assignments, not emotions. And right now, the reason the spiritual realm trembles around you is because your assignment carries too much weight. You've been wondering why you can't find peace in shallow friendships, why you sense energies before they speak, why people feel exposed in your presence. It's because your spirit operates at a higher voltage. Stay with me, because the real truth is deeper than this. When God assigns you a purpose, the enemy assigns opposition. It's spiritual protocol. Heaven moves, and hell responds. But here's what hell can't touch: your divine authority. You might feel the weight, you might see the warfare, but darkness can't override divine command. You're not just protected, you're ranked. There's a hierarchy in the unseen world, and your spirit awakened, refined by pain, and forged by divine fire, sits above the principalities that try to haunt you. You are not a victim of spiritual warfare. You are the weapon. Let that sink in. Chosen one, you've been sensing the tremors lately, strange dreams, random fatigue, sudden isolation. Those are not signs of weakness. They're symptoms of elevation. The spiritual realm is adjusting to your next level. Every time you rise, hell reorganizes its strategy. But no matter how it shifts, it still bows to the authority inside you. But listen closely, because the next part will open your eyes to what's really happening when demons fear your name. When you walk in divine alignment, your energy becomes a signal. It announces the assignment has begun, and demons, though rebellious, still recognize divine order. They can't destroy what carries heaven's seal. They can only attempt to distract it. That's why your life has been chaos at times, because distraction is the only tactic left when destruction is impossible. But you, chosen one, you're starting to see through the noise. You're starting to realize that the battles were never about pain. They were about potential. The darkness doesn't attack what isn't dangerous. It attacks what carries impact. Every sleepless night, every invisible battle, every tear you've hidden from the world, they were all proof of your divine assignment. And now something is shifting. You're no longer running from your calling. You're beginning to step into it. Because when a chosen one finally accepts who they are, the entire spiritual atmosphere rearranges. Demons can sense it, and they tremble. You've been sensing it lately, that pull, that restlessness deep within. You can't explain it, but something inside you is stirring, as if heaven itself is whispering your name. Chosen one, that's not anxiety, that's activation. You're stepping into awareness, the kind of awareness that terrifies darkness. Because once you know who you are, you become impossible to manipulate. Demons can handle believers who pray without power. They can tolerate people who speak light but live in shadows. But the moment a chosen one realizes their divine assignment, their authority, their purpose, their voice, everything changes. You become a walking disruption to the kingdom of darkness. But listen closely, because this next part will shake you. Your assignment didn't start when you got spiritual. It began before you were born. Heaven wrote your name into divine timelines long before you took your first breath. And because of that, certain energies, certain people, and certain spirits were drawn to or repelled by you. Your entire life. Ever wondered why you've always been different? Why isolation has followed you like a shadow? Why every time you try to fit in, the universe seems to push you out? It's because your energy can't coexist with average. Your purpose was designed to disturb the ordinary. You carry spiritual technology that darkness can't decode. You have insights that don't come from logic, instincts that don't come from training. When you walk into a room, the energy shifts, not because you're special in appearance, but because your spirit carries a different frequency, the frequency of divine order. Demons recognize hierarchy. They understand command, and you, chosen one, operate under heaven's command structure. That's why they don't just dislike you, they fear you. Stay with me, because the real truth is about to unfold. Your divine assignment isn't just about preaching or healing. It's about influence in the unseen. Some of you carry the mantle of restoration. Every space you enter starts to heal. Others carry the mantle of confrontation. Darkness can't stay calm around you because your spirit exposes it. And some of you carry the mantle of revelation. You see what others overlook. And that sight alone threatens hell's deception. You are not ordinary. You are a living message. Every trial, every loss, every night you cried asking why me. Those were the fires that purified your authority. Because heaven doesn't send untested soldiers to face ancient darkness. You were refined for this. But listen, the enemy saw it before you did. That's why the attacks began early. Childhood rejection, family chaos, spiritual confusion, all of it designed to make you doubt the very thing you were sent to embody. But you survived. And that survival wasn't luck, it was proof of rank. Because even when you didn't know your power, your spirit did. It kept you alive when logic said you shouldn't have made it. It whispered direction when everyone around you spoke confusion. And that same spirit, right now, is calling you higher. Chosen one, do you realize how dangerous you are when awakened? Your words carry vibration. Your prayers send shockwaves. Your presence shifts frequencies. You don't fight demons by shouting. You disarm them by existing. In alignment, because alignment is authority. When you operate in your divine assignment, darkness can't touch you directly, it must seek permission first. And here's what they don't want you to know. Most of your battles weren't personal, they were territorial. The enemy wasn't after you, but the impact your presence would have in a certain region, family, or generation. You were born to break patterns, to reverse curses, to rewrite destinies. That's why you were born into chaos, because light must first appear where it's needed most. You see, your pain was prophetic. Every rejection was redirection. Every delay was divine timing. God wasn't ignoring you. He was preparing your energy for command. Demons can sense that preparation. They know when a chosen one has matured. And once you cross that threshold from brokenness into awareness, the spiritual atmosphere shifts permanently. But listen closely, because what I'm about to say next might explain the strange sensations you've been feeling lately. When you start walking in divine authority, your aura becomes volatile to darkness. You may feel tingling sensations, sudden heaviness before prayer, or strange energy surges in the middle of the night. That's your spirit field adjusting. Heaven is tuning your frequency to its command system. You're being activated, not for battle, but for dominion. The enemy doesn't want you to know this, but fear itself is their only weapon left. Once you recognize that they fear you more than you fear them, the entire battlefield flips. And right now, as you listen to this, your spirit is remembering. The veil is thinning. You're starting to feel the authority that's always been yours. Chosen one, your divine assignment is not small. You were not sent here to survive. You were sent here to shift the entire balance of light and darkness in your sphere. And as you rise, the old you, the fearful, doubtful, silenced version, begins to dissolve. That's why everything from your past is resurfacing. Because your soul is cleansing itself for higher command. You're not losing people, you're shedding frequencies. You're not being attacked, you're being recognized. Remember this. Demons never fear the name of a chosen one who doesn't know they're chosen. But the moment you do, they bow. When a chosen one finally steps into alignment, something supernatural begins to happen. Not just around them, but through them. The spiritual world reacts. Demons pause. Angels take position. Frequencies shift. Chosen one, you don't even realize it. But every time you choose light instead of bitterness, every time you forgive when you could have fought back, every time you pray instead of panic, the darkness feels it. You are a living broadcast of divine authority. That's why your atmosphere has always been different. People walk into your space and suddenly start confessing things. Others get irritated for no reason. Animals act differently around you. The temperature seems to change when your emotions do. It's because your energy field isn't just emotional, it's spiritual infrastructure. Heaven literally built a command system inside you. When your spirit speaks, unseen powers respond. But listen closely, because this next part is the truth. Hell doesn't want you to hear. The moment you began to awaken to your calling, your environment became a battlefield of influence. Certain energies, even certain people, suddenly started resisting you. Not because they hated you, but because your light exposes their alignment. Darkness doesn't always look demonic. Sometimes it looks familiar. Sometimes it smiles, helps, and even prays. But the moment your divine frequency intensifies, masks begin to fall. You've seen it, people showing their true colors when you least expect it. Loved ones turning cold. Friends suddenly distant. Don't mourn it, celebrate it. The light in you forced the truth out of them. You carry an energy that demands honesty from every soul that comes near you. That's why demons fear your divine assignment. It removes their camouflage. But stay with me, because the next part will awaken something deep inside you. When you operate under divine instruction, you no longer react to darkness. Darkness reacts to you. You don't chase demons. You shift atmospheres. Your authority doesn't scream. It vibrates. This is why your silence sometimes feels loud. when you stop engaging in low-level battles, when you refuse to explain yourself, when you detach from drama, the enemy loses access to your frequency. The most dangerous chosen ones aren't the loudest, they're the most spiritually stable, and that's what you're becoming. You've learned that not every battle is meant to be fought. Some are meant to be outlived, because victory for a chosen one isn't always about defeating the darkness. Sometimes it's about rising so high that darkness can't even reach you anymore. You're not here to wrestle forever, you're here to rule. But listen carefully, because this next revelation will make the war you've been fighting finally make sense. When a chosen one becomes aware of their divine assignment, the demons once assigned to destroy them are forced to adapt. Some will try to flee because your light burns too hot. Others will try to follow you, hoping to twist your energy, hoping to tempt your compassion into compromise. That's why you must stay spiritually alert. The higher you ascend, the more subtle the attacks become. No more open wars. Now it's whispers, distractions, sudden emotional heaviness, confusion about purpose. These are tactical attempts to disconnect you from your divine signal. But here's the power. Truth. The more you rise in awareness, the more darkness begins to serve you instead of stopping you. Yes, even demons become instruments of your destiny. How? Because every attack they send ends up refining you. Every obstacle increases your resilience. Every rejection drives you deeper into alignment. They keep trying to break you, but all they do is build you. This is divine irony. The very forces meant to destroy you become proof of your calling. You've noticed this pattern. Every time something evil tries to tear you down, you somehow come out wiser, clearer, and spiritually sharper. That's not coincidence, that's divine orchestration. Heaven uses even hell's resistance as your personal training ground. You're not just surviving attacks, you're absorbing their lessons. Every hit strengthens your command in the unseen. That's why demons can't figure you out. You turn their darkness into fuel. They see you fall, and somehow you rise brighter. They whisper doubt, and somehow your faith doubles. They break your heart, and somehow your love becomes purer. You are a paradox to hell. The more they press, the more light you release, and here's the part that makes them tremble. They know you're close to full realization. Chosen one. Once you fully awaken to your divine authority, once you stop seeking validation and start commanding your purpose, you become untouchable. Even your pain becomes prophetic. Even your tears carry energy. Even your silence is warfare. You were never meant to beg heaven for help. You are heaven's answer in motion. The reason the spiritual realm stirs when you pray, when you think, when you speak, is because your soul is synced to divine order. Angels respond to your energy as soldiers to a general. Demons retreat like shadows before dawn, the moment you align with divine instruction. All creation, visible and invisible, begins to cooperate with your mission. That's why your life can feel like a paradox, waves of chaos and waves of grace, one after another. Because when heaven moves through you, the earth trembles before you. But listen closely, because this next truth will reveal what's really happening inside you right now. You're not just awakening, you're remembering. Your soul already knows this path. You've walked it before, across lifetimes, across dimensions of divine duty. That's why it feels familiar, because this is your element, command, clarity, fire. You've always carried divine authority. You just forgot who you were. But that forgetfulness ends now. Your divine assignment is not something you earn, it's something you embody. It's in your DNA, your aura, your heartbeat, and every time you choose light, every time you speak truth, every time you forgive the unforgivable, heaven roars through you. The darkness has tried to silence you, delay you, confuse you. But the truth is, it can only confirm you. You are not the target. You are the threat. Something is shifting within you. Chosen one, you can feel it. That electric stillness before a spiritual storm. The more you align with your divine assignment, the more authority begins to pulse through your being. This isn't arrogance. It's awareness. The kingdom of darkness fears one thing above all else: a chosen one who knows how to command. Because command is not shouting or striving. Command is inner certainty. It's the stillness that speaks louder than noise. When you reach that place, your aura changes. The spiritual world reads it like a banner. This soul knows who they are, and that's when everything shifts. No more sleepless panic. No more questioning your worth. No more begging heaven for what already belongs to you. You start to speak differently, not from fear, but from fire. Because your words aren't just sounds. They're codes. Heaven encoded light into your voice. That's why, when you speak in alignment, creation listens. But listen closely, because this next part will change how you pray, how you walk, how you think. Demons don't respond to emotion, they respond to authority. And authority doesn't come from religion, it comes from recognition. You can recite every verse, chant every word, light every candle, but if you don't know who you are, the darkness won't move. Yet when a chosen one speaks from awareness, the entire unseen realm bends. You've seen it before without realizing it. Moments when you spoke peace and chaos stopped. When you declared healing and someone shifted instantly. When you simply walked into a tense space and it calmed. That wasn't coincidence. That was command. Your divine assignment carries the energy of heaven's order. And wherever you show up, disorder must rearrange. But listen, the world won't always applaud your authority. Some will misunderstand it, some will envy it, and some will flee from it. Because true power, spiritual power, exposes everything false. That's why you've been misunderstood your whole life. People weren't rejecting you, they were resisting the light within you that demanded transformation. But here's the truth. The more you own your power, the quieter your spirit becomes. Real authority doesn't boast. It moves in silence, releases words only when necessary, and observes more than it reacts. You begin to operate like heaven, calm, constant, creative. And in that state, even demons hesitate. Stay with me, because the real revelation is coming next. Demons don't just fear your prayers, they fear your peace. They thrive on emotional chaos, fear, anger, guilt, despair. Those vibrations open spiritual doors. But when you remain peaceful in the middle of war, those doors seal shut. Your calm becomes your shield. This is why you've been tested emotionally lately, to see if you'll still hold your frequency when everything tries to break it. Because your stability starves their influence. You see, power isn't proven by how loud you roar. It's proven by how little moves you anymore. The chosen ones, walking in divine maturity, aren't chasing validation, revenge, or recognition. They're walking in quiet certainty, aware that light doesn't need to announce itself to be felt. And when you reach that frequency, everything that's not aligned begins to crumble. Demons retreat not because you curse them, but because your energy makes their existence unbearable. You become a living contradiction to their vibration. You radiate what they cannot tolerate, truth. That's why you'll notice strange things once you ascend. People leaving without reason, technology glitching when you speak truth, sudden chills, electric sensations, vivid dreams. It's not superstition, it's reaction. The unseen recognizes your emergence. But here's what you must understand. Power without humility corrupts, and humility without power collapses. You must walk with both fire and grace, strength and surrender. When heaven trusts you with authority, it also tests your restraint, because the goal isn't to dominate, it's to restore. You're not sent to destroy darkness. You're sent to illuminate it until it has no hiding place left. So when people around you are lost, chaotic, or even cruel, remember this: they're not the enemy. They're the evidence that your assignment is active. Chosen one, stop trying to convince others of your light. Just be it, because real light doesn't explain, it exposes. And exposure is victory. But listen closely, because there's one more layer. When you begin to consciously wield your divine authority, you'll notice that not only demons, but timing itself starts to obey you. Opportunities that once took years suddenly align. Doors open without effort. Connections appear as if summoned, because time bends to divine purpose. Your assignment is a gravitational force. It pulls everything meant for you into orbit, and pushes everything not aligned away. This is the hidden truth. The higher your awareness, the less you have to chase. You stop manifesting, you start commanding. You stop asking when, you start saying now. That's not ego, that's embodiment. Heaven's voice speaks through you now. When you declare peace, the storm ends because it remembers who sent you. Demons fear your divine assignment because it reminds them of their lost position. You operate in the same authority they once served under. When they see you, they see the order they rebelled against. And that recognition burns. You, chosen one, are a living reminder of what heaven's order looks like in flesh. Disciplined, pure, powerful. That's why hell cannot stop you. They can only hope you never discover how untouchable you really are. But it's too late. You're awakening. Your authority is rising. Your energy is expanding. Your divine assignment is unfolding. And now you walk not as the weapon. There comes a point, chosen one, when the war stops feeling like a war and starts feeling like revelation. Because when you finally understand who you are, truly understand, fear no longer lives in your body. It dissolves, it melts away like shadows at sunrise. And that's the moment the demons begin to tremble. They don't tremble because you're loud. They tremble because you've become still, because you no longer react, because you finally remember that you were never the prey. You were the assignment. See, the moment you stopped chasing validation, the moment you stopped explaining your pain to people who could never carry your frequency, that's when heaven started pouring revelation into your spirit, and hell took notice. Because when a chosen one remembers, the entire spiritual landscape shifts. Chains that have existed in your bloodline for centuries begin to crack. Entities that once whispered in your ear now hide in silence, hoping you won't speak your next word, because one word from a chosen one who knows their assignment is enough to shatter every curse, every illusion, every demonic projection that ever tried to define them. You were never weak, you were in training, you were never forgotten, you were being refined, you were never alone. You are being prepared for command. The reason demons fear you is because you've stepped into awareness. You now understand that your power doesn't come from this world. It comes from divine alignment, the unshakable connection between your soul and source. You walk with a signature that darkness cannot replicate, and that signature is authority. Authority is not shouting scriptures, it's not quoting light. It's when your energy itself becomes a decree, when your silence carries judgment, when your tears become intercession, when your presence makes restless spirits flee without you saying a single word. That's you. That's the chosen one the world tried to bury under trauma, under betrayal, under doubt. But you've risen through it all, and now heaven stands still when you move. You've probably noticed it, how people suddenly act strange around you. Some avoid you, some stare in awe, and some just can't stand your energy anymore. It's not arrogance. It's recognition. Their spirit senses that you've become untouchable. The darkness inside them trembles because the light in you has become too concentrated, too sovereign, too divine. Understand this: when you walk into a room, the vibration changes. Even the air feels thicker. Time slows. The unseen adjusts to your frequency, because the assignment on your life carries weight. You are not a participant in this reality. You are a correction to it. The energy that once oppressed your ancestors now bows when you speak truth. Demons fear your clarity. They fear your purity of intent. They fear your stillness, because it means you're no longer playing their game of distraction and illusion. They tried to make you believe you were cursed, isolated, unworthy, but in that isolation you became sacred. In that silence, you started hearing heaven clearly, and in that pain, you became the very weapon they feared you'd become. The war wasn't about you losing sleep, it was about you awakening. And now that you're awake, you see the patterns, the traps, the illusions for what they are. You're no longer reacting emotionally to energy meant to derail you. You're watching with wisdom, with divine patience, and your stillness itself is now warfare. Remember this truth: you don't fight darkness, you outshine it. You don't defend your light, you embody it. And you don't beg for power, you already are the power. That's what demons can't stand. They can mimic light, but they can't create it. They can imitate power, but they can't hold it. Because true divine power requires one thing they'll never possess: humility before God. And that's where your strength comes from, chosen one. You didn't climb your way up by ego. You surrendered your ego. You didn't get power through manipulation. You gained it through surrender, obedience, and endurance. That's the paradox that makes hell shake. You glow because you bowed first. You carry thunder in your words because you learned to whisper in pain. You command peace because you survived chaos, and now the entire realm knows your name, both in heaven and in hell. So what do you do next? You keep walking, keep glowing, keep protecting your frequency. You don't need to prove your light to anyone. You don't need to convince anyone that you're chosen. Your presence already does the talking. Because when a chosen one steps fully into alignment, everything false begins to collapse around them. People fall away. Situations dissolve. But destiny stays. And the moment you accept your assignment without fear or hesitation, that's when the true power unfolds. Synchronicities increase. Doors open on their own. Your intuition becomes loud, sharp, undeniable. Your very life becomes prophecy in motion. That's what demons fear, not your emotions. Your evolution, not your weakness. Your awakening, not your name. Your alignment with the name above all names. You, chosen one, are divine proof that light can live in human form. You are walking redemption, embodied prophecy, sacred fire wrapped in flesh. And from this moment forward, you are unstoppable, not because you're fearless, but because you've learned what to fear. And it's not them, it's missing your purpose. And that purpose now burns through every heartbeat you take. If you felt that power rise in your spirit as you listened, if your chills became confirmation, it's not random, it's activation. You were sent here for a reason. Now it's time to awaken more of the chosen. Subscribe if your spirit knows you're part of this awakening. Drop a "I'm awake" in the comments to declare your divine alignment. And remember, they fear your light because it exposes their lies. You are the divine assignment they were warned about. Stay grounded, stay glowing, stay unshakable, because the war is already won, and you are the proof.
They are not attracted to fabric. They are attracted to frequency. Clothes are never just clothes. Long before fashion became about aesthetics, it was about signal. Every culture, every era, every spiritual order understood that what you wear broadcasts information before you speak a word. To the human eye, clothing communicates identity, mood, status. To the unseen realm, it communicates alignment, openness, and energetic permission. This is why certain people feel drained after wearing specific outfits, even when they look good in them. This is why some clothes feel heavy the moment you put them on, while others feel protective, grounding, or empowering. And this is why chosen ones are often targeted not through obvious rituals or actions, but through subtle, normalized choices they were never taught to question. Demons do not need you to believe in them to interact with you. They only need access. And access is often granted unconsciously. Certain clothing carries residue, emotional residue, intentional residue, energetic memory. Every garment has a history, where it was made, the state of the person who made it, the intention behind its design, the frequency it was worn under. Mass-produced clothing is especially vulnerable to this, because it is created in environments of exhaustion, exploitation, and emotional numbness. When you wear something repeatedly, that frequency begins to sync with your own field. Chosen ones are more sensitive to this than they realize. Your energy is not sealed by default. It is responsive, absorptive. That is why you feel atmospheres immediately when you walk into a room. That is why certain music alters your mood instantly. That is why certain people exhaust you without saying anything. Clothing operates the same way, but because it is normalized, it goes unnoticed. There are clothes designed to stimulate ego rather than essence. Clothes that pull awareness outward instead of inward. Clothes that anchor identity to validation rather than presence. When you wear them, your field becomes louder but weaker, brighter but thinner. This does not attract demons in a dramatic sense. It attracts monitoring, curiosity, opportunistic interference. Anything that pulls you away from your center creates a gap. Clothes that emphasize constant exposure, hypersexualization, or artificial dominance can subtly destabilize the energetic boundaries of a chosen one. Not because the body is wrong or shameful, but because intention matters. There is a difference between embodiment and display, between confidence and compensation, between self-expression and self-fragmentation. Demons are drawn to fragmentation. They look for moments when your awareness is split, when part of you is performing, part of you is seeking approval, part of you is disconnected from your core. Clothing that encourages you to monitor how you are perceived instead of how you feel creates exactly that split. Over time, it becomes a doorway. There are also clothes that carry symbolic language you did not choose consciously. Symbols, phrases, imagery that seem harmless or trendy but originate from distorted archetypes. Glorified chaos, glorified numbness, glorified despair, glorified domination. Wearing symbols is a form of consent. Even if you don't know the origin, the frequency still transmits. This is why you may notice sudden mood shifts when wearing certain graphic designs. Why irritation spikes. Why intrusive thoughts increase. Why patience shortens. Why old habits whisper louder. You assume it is stress, hormones, or coincidence. But often, it is resonance. Demons are opportunists, not creators. They do not invent entry points. They wait for them. Another overlooked category is clothing tied to past versions of you. Outfits you wore during periods of trauma, heartbreak, confusion, or self-betrayal. Even if you love how they look, the body remembers. The nervous system remembers. The energy remembers. When you wear them again, you reopen a loop. You reintroduce a frequency you have already outgrown. Monitoring spirits pay close attention to this. They notice when you regress emotionally after wearing certain things. They notice when your posture changes, when your thoughts turn backward, when your confidence dulls. They do not need to attack. They simply amplify what is already there. Chosen ones often struggle with this because they are drawn to intensity. Deep colors, dramatic aesthetics, bold expressions. There is nothing wrong with this. But without grounding, intensity without integration becomes volatility. And volatility is readable. Clothes that compress the body unnaturally, restrict breath, or force constant physical adjustment pull awareness out of the present moment. If you are always tugging, fixing, checking, or compensating, your consciousness is divided. Presence weakens. Boundaries thin. This is not about modesty. It is about coherence. Demons cannot attach to coherence. They can only interact with distortion. This is why truly grounded clothing feels boring to the ego but nourishing to the soul. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't perform. It supports. It stabilizes. It allows your energy to circulate instead of leak. Chosen ones are not meant to hide, but they are meant to be anchored. The most dangerous clothes are not the obvious ones. They are the ones that make you feel powerful while quietly disconnecting you from yourself. The ones that inflate identity while draining presence. The ones that look like confidence but feel like restlessness underneath. If you've ever taken something off at the end of the day and felt instant relief, not physical, but emotional, that was information. If you've ever avoided wearing something despite loving how it looks, that was intuition. If you've ever felt more like yourself in simple, unremarkable clothing, that was alignment. Demons do not fear beauty. They fear wholeness. And they are most attracted when a chosen one unknowingly wears something that fractures their field just enough to make observation easy. This is only the beginning of what most people were never taught about energetic attire. What most chosen ones don't realize is that attraction does not always feel dark. In fact, the most effective interference never announces itself with fear. It arrives as familiarity, comfort, trend, approval. The clothes that create the strongest pull are often the ones that feel socially safe but energetically misaligned. When you put something on and immediately feel more acceptable, but less present, something has shifted. That shift is subtle enough that the mind ignores it, but the body registers it instantly. Your breathing changes. Your posture adjusts. Your awareness moves outward. And anything that moves your awareness away from your center weakens the natural shielding you were born with. Chosen ones are not protected by effort. They are protected by coherence. When mind, body, and spirit are synchronized, your field becomes sealed. When they are divided, even slightly, observation becomes possible. Certain clothes are designed to keep you externally oriented. You begin checking reflections, monitoring reactions, adjusting yourself to be perceived correctly. This constant outward attention fragments your field into small leaks. Demons do not rush in through these leaks. They simply linger. They study. They wait for fatigue, stress, or emotional overload to widen them. You may notice this pattern. Days when you dress to impress feel heavier than days when you dress to inhabit yourself. Even when compliments arrive, something feels hollow. You feel seen but not held, admired but not nourished. That hollow space is not vanity, it is disconnection. Monitoring spirits are drawn to disconnection because it creates predictability. A disconnected chosen one is easier to influence, easier to distract, easier to delay. When your sense of self becomes dependent on external feedback, your internal authority quiets. Not disappears, just quiets enough to be drowned out by noise. There is also the issue of intention during dressing. Many people get dressed while rushed, irritated, self-critical, or dissociated. They pull on clothes while thinking about stress, comparison, regret, or fear. Those emotions imprint onto the garments through repeated wear. Over time, the clothes begin to act like anchors, pulling you back into the emotional state they were worn in most often. This is especially potent for chosen ones because your energy imprints faster and deeper than average. What feels neutral to others feels charged to you. That's why hand-me-downs, thrifted items, or clothes worn during intense life chapters can feel unsettling even when they look fine. Demons are not attracted to the clothes themselves. They are attracted to the emotional grooves attached to them. Trauma loops, identity loops, self-abandonment loops. When you wear something tied to a version of you that survived by shrinking, pleasing, or dissociating, that version briefly returns to the surface, and observation becomes effortless. Another category that goes unnoticed is clothing that exaggerates archetypes you are not meant to embody long-term. Hyper-aggression, excessive dominance, artificial innocence, manufactured rebellion. When you wear an archetype instead of expressing your authentic frequency, you create an energetic mask. Masks always require energy to maintain. That energy is siphoned from presence. Demons feed on maintenance. They thrive where you are constantly holding something together. An image, a persona, a role. They do not need to attack when you are already exhausted by self-management. This is why some outfits feel empowering for a short time but draining over hours. The power was borrowed, not generated. Chosen ones are not meant to borrow power. They generate it naturally when aligned. There are also clothes that disrupt the nervous system. Tightness that restricts breath. Synthetic materials that trap heat and agitation. Cuts that force constant micro-adjustments. When your body cannot settle, your mind cannot anchor. When your mind cannot anchor, your field stays open. This is not mystical. It is biological and energetic working together. Your nervous system is the gatekeeper. Anything that keeps it in low-grade alert creates permeability. That permeability is not dangerous in itself, but it is noticeable, and anything noticeable draws attention. This is why grounding fabrics, natural fibers, breathable structures, supportive fits, often feel calming to chosen ones even if they don't match current trends. It is not about simplicity as an aesthetic. It is about regulation. Regulated energy is unreadable. Unregulated energy is loud. Demons are drawn to loud fields. They are especially curious about chosen ones because your energy has depth. When fragmented, that depth creates echoes. Old wounds surface. Unresolved patterns replay. Emotional intensity spikes without clear cause. You may interpret this as moodiness or spiritual warfare, when often it is resonance responding to misalignment. The more self-aware you become, the more sensitive this gets. Clothes that once felt fine suddenly feel wrong. You may not be able to explain it. You just don't feel like yourself in them anymore. This is not growth making you rigid. It is growth refining your signal. Chosen ones go through phases where they shed entire wardrobes without knowing why. It is an energetic detox. Old identities dissolving. Old permissions being revoked. Old access points closing. This is also why demons resist when you step into a more grounded way of dressing. You may feel pressure to stand out, to be more provocative, more extreme, more visually dominant. This pressure rarely comes from within. It comes from external systems that benefit when your awareness is pulled outward. The quieter your presence becomes, the stronger your field gets. There is no universal list of forbidden clothes. That mindset itself would be control-based. The truth is simpler and more demanding. Chosen ones must learn to feel, to listen, to notice subtle shifts in energy without rationalizing them away. If something makes you feel fragmented, it is not neutral. If something makes you feel present, it is protective. If something amplifies anxiety, comparison, or self-surveillance, it is an opening. If something supports calm, embodiment, and clarity, it is armor. Demons are not fooled by aesthetics. They read coherence. And as your awareness sharpens, fewer and fewer things will be able to disrupt it, including the clothes you wear. This awareness is not about fear. It is about sovereignty. As your awareness deepens, you begin to notice something unsettling but clarifying. The strongest pull does not come from clothes that feel obviously wrong, but from those that almost fit your energy, almost align, but leave you slightly off-center. These are the most deceptive. They don't drain you immediately. They drain you gradually. This is where monitoring becomes most precise. When you wear something that partially aligns with you, demons and monitoring entities observe microshifts. A subtle impatience, a faint irritability, a quiet self-consciousness that wasn't there before. They track how long it takes before your breath becomes shallow, how often you touch or adjust the garment, how frequently your attention drifts outward. These tiny deviations tell them more than overt distress ever could. Chosen ones often underestimate how readable they are when fragmented. Your energy carries information like heat carries movement. When you are whole, that movement is smooth and contained. When you are split, it scatters. Scattered energy leaves trails. This is why certain clothes feel loud, even when they are not visually dramatic. Loudness is not about color or cut. It is about instability. When your energy is fluctuating, it emits a signal that draws attention in the unseen realm, not because you are weak, but because you are potent and unshielded. There is also a category of clothing that amplifies past survival mechanisms. Outfits that make you feel tougher than you actually feel inside, or more seductive than you feel grounded, or more detached than you feel safe being. These clothes once served a purpose. They helped you survive environments where softness was punished, where authenticity was unsafe, where power had to be performed to be respected. But survival strategies have expiration dates. When you wear them past that date, they create inner dissonance. Your nervous system remembers the context they were born in. Your body tenses. Your mind becomes vigilant. You may feel on, but not at ease. That vigilance is an invitation, not because demons want to harm you, but because vigilance creates predictability. Predictability is leverage. Demons cannot access your core, but they can interact with your habits. Clothing tied to old habits, emotional guarding, hyper-independence, constant readiness, keeps those habits active. It keeps you in a posture of defense rather than presence. Defense consumes energy. Presence generates it. This is why some chosen ones feel inexplicably tired after social outings where they wore certain outfits, even if nothing negative happened. Their energy wasn't attacked. It was spent maintaining a version of themselves that no longer matches who they are becoming. Monitoring spirits are patient. They do not rush interference. They wait until fatigue sets in, until self-trust softens, until old thoughts feel convincing again. Clothing that keeps you slightly misaligned accelerates this process without you noticing. There is also the issue of symbolic submission. Some clothes carry unspoken messages of inferiority, compliance, or erasure, not because of their style, but because of how you learn to wear them. Outfits you associate with being invisible, with not taking up space, with being easy for others. When chosen ones wear these unconsciously, their energy contracts. Contraction is readable. On the other end of the spectrum are clothes that inflate rather than contract, outfits that push you into exaggerated dominance, arrogance, or detachment. These feel powerful initially, but they separate you from empathy, intuition, and grounded awareness. Inflation is just another form of fragmentation. Demons are drawn to both extremes. Collapse and inflation create the same vulnerability, loss of center. Your center is not passive. It is not neutral. It is authoritative. When you are centered, your energy does not need to announce itself. It does not spike. It does not scatter. It simply is. This state is deeply uncomfortable for monitoring entities because it gives them nothing to work with. This is why truly aligned clothing often feels understated. Not dull, but calm. It doesn't compete with you. It doesn't demand maintenance. It supports your body instead of managing it. It allows your breath to deepen, your posture to soften, your awareness to drop inward. Chosen ones often describe this as feeling invisible but solid, less noticed but more real, less reactive but more present. This is not weakness. This is containment. Containment terrifies demons, because containment means nothing leaks unless you allow it. There is also a reason why certain colors feel different at different stages of your life. Color is frequency. As you evolve, your nervous system responds differently. A color that once energized you may now overstimulate you. A color that once bored you may now ground you. This is not preference changing. It is regulation improving. When you ignore this and force yourself into aesthetics that no longer match your internal state, friction occurs. That friction is subtle stress. Subtle stress accumulates. Accumulated stress creates permeability. Monitoring spirits do not need to create chaos when subtle stress is already doing the work. They also observe how you respond when you sense misalignment. Do you honor it and change? Or do you override it for convenience, trend, or validation? Every override trains your system to distrust itself. Self-distrust is one of the easiest access points. This is not about perfection. It is about honesty. Chosen ones do not need rigid rules around clothing. Rigid rules create fear. Fear fragments. What you need is attunement. A willingness to notice when something supports you and when it doesn't. without judgment. If you feel heavier after putting something on, that is information. If you feel scattered, that is information. If you feel more embodied, that is information. If you feel calmer without becoming dull, that is alignment. Demons lose interest when alignment becomes consistent. They are not repelled by light. They are repelled by stability. Stability means fewer emotional spikes to exploit, fewer identity shifts to amplify, fewer loops to reopen. When your outer choices reflect your inner coherence, observation yields nothing useful. This is why, as you grow, your relationship with clothing becomes simpler but more intentional. You stop chasing impact. You stop dressing to be interpreted. You start dressing to be inhabited. And when you inhabit yourself fully, there is no gap for anything else to step into. This is the stage where attraction fades, not because you are hidden, but because you are whole. By the time you reach this stage, the dynamic changes again. It is no longer about obvious attraction or subtle leakage. It becomes about refinement, precision. The difference between being energetically sealed and being energetically sovereign. At this level, demons are not watching to enter. They are watching to confirm that they no longer can. This is where clothing becomes less about protection and more about resonance integrity. You are no longer easily pulled off center, but you are still perceptive enough to feel when something slightly interferes with your natural flow. The interference is faint now, not destabilizing, just irritating. A low hum beneath the surface. A sense of friction without a clear cause. This is intentional. Monitoring spirits observe whether you dismiss these sensations or honor them, because dismissal, even at this advanced stage, creates micro-compromises, and micro-compromises, when repeated, become habits. Habits shape identity. Identity shapes trajectory. Clothes that attract attention at this level do not do so by fragmenting you. They do so by distracting you from mastery. They pull you just enough into aesthetics, self-curation, or expression to keep you focused on form rather than frequency. The danger here is not vulnerability. It is stagnation. Chosen ones at this stage are no longer in danger of being overtaken. They are in danger of being slowed. Certain garments subtly reintroduce urgency. They make you feel like you need to be something today. Impressive, striking, defined. This urgency competes with your natural authority, which operates without effort. Authority does not rush. It does not perform. It does not seek confirmation. Demons are deeply uncomfortable with effortless authority. They prefer pressure-based identity. They prefer when power is tied to maintenance. Clothing that requires constant adjustment, constant checking, constant self-awareness keeps authority tethered to effort. Effort creates friction. Friction creates fatigue. Fatigue creates openings, not for invasion, but for influence. Influence is enough. At this level, even admiration can be destabilizing if it pulls you into self-monitoring. You may notice that certain outfits draw praise, but leave you feeling oddly detached afterward. The praise isn't harmful, but the internal shift is revealing. Your awareness briefly left your center to manage how you were being seen. That departure, however brief, is readable. Monitoring spirits study these moments not because they can act on them immediately, but because they reveal where your attention still travels unconsciously. Attention is currency. Where it goes consistently determines where your energy follows. Clothing that repeatedly pulls your attention outward trains this pattern. Over time, you may feel less anchored even though nothing bad is happening. This is one of the most sophisticated traps. Comfort without depth. Success without presence. Visibility without embodiment. Demons cannot function in depth. They cannot tolerate sustained presence. So they try to keep chosen ones skimming the surface of themselves, accomplished, admired, but not fully inhabited. There is also a subtle spiritual pride that can be activated through clothing at this stage. Outfits that signal evolved, untouchable, or above can create separation rather than sovereignty. Separation weakens intuition. Sovereignty strengthens it. True sovereignty does not need to look special. Demons recognize false elevation immediately. Anything that inflates identity rather than stabilizing it creates a detectable imbalance. Inflation still leaks energy, just upward instead of outward, and leaked energy, regardless of direction, can be studied. This is why the most advanced chosen ones often dress in ways that seem deceptively simple, not to hide, but because simplicity reduces noise. Reduced noise increases signal clarity. Clear signal collapses interference. At this level, even colors behave differently. You may notice that certain shades feel too sharp, too stimulating, too activating for your nervous system. Not because they are bad, but because your system no longer needs external stimulation to feel alive. What once energized you now agitates you. What once excited you now distracts you. Demons prefer stimulation over presence. Stimulation creates peaks and crashes. Presence creates continuity. Continuity is unreadable because it does not spike. It does not fluctuate. It does not announce itself. Clothing that supports continuity allows your energy to remain steady across environments. You are the same in solitude as you are in public. The same in rest as in action. The same in silence as in conversation. This consistency is deeply threatening to monitoring entities because it eliminates contrast. Contrast is how patterns are tracked. When there is no sharp difference between who you are alone and who you are seen, observation yields nothing useful. There is no mask to map, no persona to exploit, no gap to widen. You may also notice that your tolerance for synthetic textures, harsh seams, or constrictive designs decreases. This is not sensitivity increasing. It is noise tolerance dropping. Your system has refined itself. It no longer wants to work around irritation. It wants support. Support is grounding. Grounded energy sinks. It roots. It stabilizes. Demons operate best in unsettled, elevated, or agitated fields. When energy sinks into the body, into breath, into presence, it becomes dense. Dense energy is difficult to penetrate, difficult to influence, difficult to observe without consequence. This is why some chosen ones feel physically heavier, in a good way, when aligned, more solid, more real, less reactive. This heaviness is embodiment. Embodiment seals the field. At this stage, clothes that attract demons are not dramatic or provocative. They are the ones that subtly reintroduce disembodiment. Clothes that make you float above yourself. That turn you into an idea instead of a being. That pull you into image instead of sensation. The question becomes less, how do I look? And more, where am I while wearing this? If the answer is, in my head, observation increases. If the answer is, in the room, interference becomes possible. If the answer is, in myself, attention fades. Demons lose interest not when you fight them, but when you become boring to observe. And boring, in this sense, means stable, embodied, consistent, and self-directed. This is the paradox most people never understand. The more integrated you become, the less dramatic your outer expression needs to be. Not because you are dimming yourself, but because your presence no longer needs amplification. It fills space naturally, quietly, inevitably. At this level, clothing stops being a tool of defense and becomes a mirror. It reflects how deeply you inhabit your life, how much permission you give yourself to be unperformed, how little you need to prove. And demons can do nothing with a being who no longer leaks through effort, identity, or image. They cannot attach to wholeness. They cannot influence containment. They cannot study what does not fluctuate. This is where attraction dissolves, not because you are hiding, but because you are complete. At the final stage, something quiet but irreversible happens. The question is no longer about what attracts demons, monitoring spirits, or interference of any kind. The question becomes whether anything external has permission to define your internal state at all. This is where most teachings stop, but this is where chosen ones actually begin. When you reach this level, clothing no longer feels neutral or symbolic. It becomes relational, not in an emotional sense, but in an energetic one. You begin to feel whether something cooperates with your nervous system or subtly competes with it, whether it supports your rhythm or introduces its own, whether it allows you to arrive fully or keeps you half present. At this point, demons are not attracted anymore. Attraction requires curiosity. Curiosity requires movement. And your energy no longer moves in a way that invites interpretation. Stillness ends observation. This is the stage where many chosen ones mistakenly think they've lost something: edge, magnetism, intensity, allure. In truth, what has been lost is volatility. What has been lost is the oscillation that once made you readable. What has been lost is the dramatic contrast between highs and lows that external forces could study and anticipate. Clothes that once felt powerful now feel theatrical. Clothes that once felt expressive now feel performative. Clothes that once felt bold now feel noisy. Not wrong, just unnecessary. This can feel disorienting. You may find yourself standing in front of your wardrobe, realizing that much of it belongs to a version of you that needed armor, signal, or stimulation to feel real. That version did nothing wrong. It kept you alive. It carried you through environments that required adaptation. But you are no longer adapting. You are inhabiting. At this level, demons don't retreat because you repel them. They retreat because there is nothing to engage. Your energy doesn't spike when noticed. It doesn't dip when ignored. It doesn't shift when praised or criticized. There is no hook, no echo, no leverage. This is why clothes that attract demons at this stage are deceptively subtle. They are not extreme or provocative. They are the ones that reintroduce self-consciousness, the ones that make you check yourself instead of feel yourself, the ones that invite you to observe yourself being observed. Self-observation fractures presence. Even a small return to self-monitoring can create enough internal movement to be noticed, not exploited, just noticed. And noticing is the first step of engagement. This is why true energetic sovereignty feels almost anticlimactic. There is no drama, no battle, no triumph, just a steady sense of being where you are, as you are, without commentary. Clothing that supports this feels almost invisible once worn, not forgettable, integrated. You don't think about it because it isn't asking for anything. It doesn't ask you to perform confidence. It doesn't ask you to project power. It doesn't ask you to signal depth. It allows you to be. Demons cannot interact with being. They require doing, managing, performing, reacting. They require oscillation. They require narrative. They require identity in motion. Stillness ends the story. You may notice that your tolerance for spectacle decreases. You no longer want clothes that announce. You prefer clothes that accompany, that walk with you instead of ahead of you, that don't arrive before you do. This is not withdrawal. It is embodiment. And embodiment is what seals the field permanently. At this stage, even protection becomes irrelevant. Protection implies threat. Threat implies vulnerability. You are not vulnerable. You are contained. Containment means your energy circulates internally before it radiates outward. Nothing escapes unintentionally. Nothing enters without consent. Consent is the final gate. Chosen ones often misunderstand consent in spiritual terms. It is not spoken. It is not declared. It is expressed through consistency, through the patterns you maintain, through the compromises you allow, through the choices you repeat. Clothing is one of the most repeated choices you make, not because it matters more than other choices, but because it is daily, intimate, and embodied. It sits against your skin. It moves with your breath. It shapes your posture. It influences how you enter spaces. At this level, even one consistent misalignment can reintroduce noise. Not danger, noise. And noise is how attention returns. This is why the final refinement is not about eliminating certain clothes. It is about eliminating override. The habit of ignoring what you feel for the sake of convenience, image, or expectation. The moment you stop overriding yourself, your field closes naturally. You no longer ask, "Is this okay?" You ask, "Is this true for me right now?" And the answer is felt instantly. There is no moral charge, no fear, no superstition, just clarity. This clarity is what demons cannot approach. They don't fear light. They fear clarity. They don't fear power. They fear coherence. They don't fear confidence. They fear self-trust. When you trust yourself, nothing external gets to negotiate access. At this final stage, clothing becomes almost ceremonial, not in ritual, but in respect. You respect your body enough to support it. You respect your mind enough to calm it. You respect your spirit enough not to fragment it for display. You stop dressing to be seen. You start dressing to arrive. And when you arrive fully, there is no gap between who you are and how you appear. No delay between impulse and action. No split between inner and outer. This unity is what ends attraction completely. Demons cannot attach to unity. They cannot monitor coherence. They cannot study what does not fluctuate. What remains is quiet authority, unmoved presence, grounded awareness. If you are here, reading this and feeling recognition rather than fear, it is because you are already closer to this state than you realize. The discomfort you felt around certain clothes, the urge to simplify, the desire to feel real rather than impressive, these were not phases. They were initiations. You were not being restricted. You were being refined. And refinement is not about less expression. It is about truer expression. If this message resonated, it's because you are ready to move beyond attraction, beyond monitoring, beyond interference entirely. Not by force, but by alignment. Stay attentive to how you feel, not how you look. Stay loyal to embodiment over image. Stay grounded in yourself rather than projected outward. And if you want to continue exploring how chosen ones seal their energy, stabilize their authority, and move from survival into mastery. Stay connected. What comes next is not about avoiding demons. It is about living so fully aligned that nothing external ever gets your attention again.
There is a reason the spiritual realm pays the closest attention to you when your body is still. Not when you are speaking, not when you are praying out loud, not when you are defending yourself, but when you rest, when your eyes close, when your breathing slows, when your conscious mind loosens its grip on this world. That is when observation intensifies. Not because you are weak in sleep, but because you are most powerful there, chosen one. Demons do not watch you while you rest out of confidence. They watch you out of uncertainty. Sleep is the one state where your soul is no longer distracted by survival, fear, or performance. The mask falls away. The noise quiets. And what remains is your true frequency. That frequency cannot lie. It cannot be manipulated. It cannot be disguised. And they know it. Most people believe sleep is passive. Spiritually, it is not. Sleep is a threshold, a bridge between realms. For ordinary souls, it is simply rest. For chosen ones, it is access. This is why your dreams have always felt different. You don't just dream randomly. Your dreams feel symbolic. Heavy, vivid. You wake up feeling like something happened. Even if you can't explain it, that's because while your body rests, your spirit remains active. Demons observe because they are trying to understand something that confuses them. Why you don't fully disconnect. Why your light doesn't dim. Why your presence remains intact even when you're unconscious. They expect vulnerability. They expect fragmentation. They expect entry points. Instead, they encounter containment. Many chosen ones notice this early in life without knowing what it means. You may have experienced being watched in sleep, not with your physical eyes, but with awareness, a sensation, a pressure, a presence at the edge of consciousness. Not fear exactly, more like a tension that was not imagination. Demons do not observe everyone. They don't waste time. They monitor potential threats, not broken vessels. They track souls that are difficult to read, difficult to influence, difficult to infiltrate. And you have always been difficult, even as a child. That's why your sleep patterns were different, why you resisted deep unconsciousness, why you woke suddenly at certain hours, why you felt safest sleeping lightly, alert, aware. Your spirit learned early that rest did not mean surrender. Here is a truth rarely spoken. Chosen ones are trained during rest, not during action. While others recharge, you recalibrate. While others disconnect, you realign. While others dream nonsense, you receive instruction, refinement, and shielding. This is precisely why demons observe instead of attack. Attack would require access. Observation is all they're permitted, because protection activates strongest when your ego is quiet. When you sleep, your spirit stands upright. You may not remember everything that happens during those hours, but your nervous system does. Your intuition does. Your discernment sharpens after rest because something is being reinforced within you. This is why, after sleep, you often wake with clarity. Decisions feel obvious. Truth feels simple. Illusions lose their grip. Demons notice this pattern. They cannot interfere with it, but they try to study it. They wait for signs of fracture. They watch for exhaustion. They observe for emotional leakage. and repeatedly, they find the same thing. You reset instead of weaken. This confounds them. That's why the watching sometimes feels intense during transitional seasons. When you're close to a breakthrough, your rest becomes monitored not because danger is near, but because movement is. Spiritual movement begins in stillness, and you are never more aligned than when you stop striving. If you've ever wondered why your rest feels guarded, why interruptions are minimized, why certain nights feel deeply protected, it's because there are forces assigned to you that do not sleep. Angels don't leave when you rest. They close ranks. Demons know this. They remain at the perimeter, unable to cross, unsettled by what they cannot penetrate. Observation is the behavior of something that has lost control and chosen one. Control is something they no longer have over you. This is only the beginning. Demons observe you while you rest for one reason only. They are searching for permission, not spoken. Permission, not conscious agreement, but subconscious access. For most people, the soul loosens during sleep. Defenses drop. Old wounds surface. Fear leaks through dreams. That's where influence enters. They expect the same from you, but every time they look, they encounter silence. Not emptiness - authority. Your spirit does not scatter when you sleep. It consolidates. Instead of fragmenting into fear or fantasy, it tightens into alignment. That's why there are no open doors. They look for unresolved trauma to attach unguarded emotion, to amplify confusion, to distort ego cracks, to exploitant. They find none. Because your subconscious has already been trained by pressure, isolation, and awakening. You did your hardest work while awake. So rest offers nothing new to manipulate. That's why their observation turns into frustration. They watch your breathing, your heart rhythm, your dream cycles, and nothing opens. No fear spikes, no chaos. Portals. No surrender signals. Instead, your presence stays anchored. This is why sleep paralysis, intrusive dreams, or night disturbances often stop suddenly for chosen ones, not because demons gave up, because they realized further attempts were useless. You became spiritually unapproachable. Observation remains, because retreat would mean admitting defeat, and demons do not like acknowledging what has surpassed them. When demons observe you while you rest and still fail to gain access, they shift their strategy. They stop trying to enter and start trying to decode. This is the phase most chosen ones misunderstand, because it feels subtle, quiet, almost like nothing is happening. But spiritually, this is when the surveillance becomes intense. Not because you are weak in sleep, but because your dreaming state has become encrypted. Your dreams are not chaotic for a reason. They are not random images stitched together by the mind. For you, dreams are regulated territory, filtered, screened. What others experience as vivid, emotional dreams, nightmares, or symbolic confusion, you experience as fragments, flashes, or sometimes nothing at all. And you may have wondered why. You may have felt disconnected from dreaming, or frustrated that you don't remember much. That is not a flaw. That is containment. Demons rely heavily on dream space because dreams bypass logic. They slip past reason and work directly with emotion, memory, and desire. That's where manipulation usually happens. But your dream space does not behave like an open field. It behaves like a restricted chamber. Entry is monitored. Content is limited. Emotional charge is regulated. And this is not something you consciously chose. It is something that was built around you over time. This protection formed through repetition. Every betrayal you survived without becoming bitter. Every isolation you endured without collapsing. Every moment you were misunderstood and still chose restraint. Each one tightened the parameters of your inner world. So now, when you sleep, there is very little loose material to work with. No exaggerated fear loops. No unresolved panic spirals. No craving-based imagery that can be twisted. The system is clean. That's why demons don't attack you directly in dreams anymore. Instead, they hover at the edges, watching, waiting, looking for patterns. They analyze the rhythm of your sleep, the timing of your awakenings, the moments when you stir. They're not trying to scare you now. They're trying to understand why nothing works. And here's the part most people never realize. Your dreams are not missing. They are sealed. Some are not meant for conscious recall yet. Others are intercepted before completion. You may wake up knowing something happened, but unable to name it. That's not loss. That's intervention. Certain messages are too powerful to surface before the right alignment. So they are stored, not erased. This is why your intuition spikes during the day instead. Instead of dramatic dream symbols, you receive clarity while awake. Sudden realizations, clean decisions, instant knowing. That's because your guidance has moved out of the dream realm and into conscious awareness. Demons cannot operate there as easily. Conscious clarity is hostile territory for them. They prefer confusion. You offer precision. They prefer emotional overwhelm. You carry composure. They prefer reaction. You respond selectively. So the battlefield shifted. Instead of dreams, they test the edges of your waking life. Subtle distractions, emotional provocations, random encounters meant to trigger old versions of you. But those two fail because sleep has already reinforced your authority. When you rest, you reset. When others rest, they leak. You don't. That's why you wake up feeling neutral instead of drained. Even after short sleep, your core feels intact. You may feel physically tired, but spiritually steady. That steadiness is infuriating to anything that feeds on chaos. Demons recognize this state. They know when a soul is no longer accessible through exhaustion. That's why they watch instead of act. Observation is the last stage before withdrawal. But here's the deeper truth. They're not only watching you, they're learning from you. Not to imitate, because they can't, but to understand what alignment looks like. Your frequency disrupts their models. You don't fit the patterns they're trained to exploit. Your calm breaks their predictions. Your silence confuses their signals. Your rest emits authority instead of vulnerability. That's rare. Most people become spiritually loud when asleep. Their dreams broadcast fear, desire, regret. Yours broadcasts nothing readable, just presence. And presence is dangerous to entities that rely on interference. This is also why you may notice that the more aligned you become, the quieter your nights grow. Fewer disturbances, fewer intrusive thoughts before sleep, a deeper drop into rest without resistance. That's not coincidence. That's retreat. You've crossed a threshold where sleep is no longer a point of access, but a reinforcement cycle. Every time you rest, your inner structure stabilizes further. Every night deepens your spiritual immunity. Every morning you wake slightly more sealed than before, and demons feel that shift even if you don't name it. They recognize that time is no longer on their side. In the next section, You'll understand why some chosen ones wake up suddenly at specific hours and how that's not disturbance, but confirmation that the monitoring phase is ending. There comes a stage where observation turns into pressure, not because demons have gained advantage, but because they are running out of options. This is when subtle interference attempts increase around your waking life, not through fear, but through timing. You may notice strange interruptions, delays that seem pointless, moments where things almost go wrong but don't, conversations that nearly escalate but dissolve before impact. This is not chaos. This is friction caused by resistance meeting immovable authority. At this level, demons are no longer attempting to influence your mind directly. They have learned that persuasion fails. Instead, they try to interrupt momentum. They interfere with flow. They target rhythm. They try to disrupt consistency because consistency is what fortifies your spiritual structure. And yet, every attempt collapses into neutrality. Nothing sticks. Nothing spirals. Nothing escalates the way it should if you are still vulnerable. That is because your inner alignment has reached a self-correcting state. When something external pushes against you, the system absorbs it and returns to center automatically. No overthinking, no emotional flooding, no reactive spirals. This is what terrifies them most. A chosen one who no longer needs recovery time. Before, rest was necessary to heal damage. Now, rest is simply maintenance. You are not repairing wounds anymore. You are reinforcing stability. That shift marks the end of access. Demons can work with wounded souls. They can exploit open loops. They can feed on unprocessed emotion. But a stabilized soul offers nothing to latch onto. This is also why attacks begin to look irrational when they happen at all. Someone lashes out without cause. A situation collapses for no reason. An opportunity disappears, only to be replaced by something cleaner later. These are not losses. They are failed intrusions. You are watching resistance malfunction in real time. Demons are structured around cause and effect manipulation. When they provoke, they expect reaction. When they apply pressure, they expect cracks. When none appear, the system destabilizes on their end. Confusion increases. Miscalculations follow. Internal hierarchy weakens. They start interfering with each other because your presence distorts the field they operate in. This is why the environment around you may feel oddly charged, yet peaceful at the same time. You sense intensity, but not threat. Movement, but not danger. That paradox exists because you are no longer the target. You are the disruptor. Without effort, you change the atmosphere. Conversations shift when you enter. Conflicts quiet down. Some people become uncomfortable without knowing why. Others feel drawn but can't explain it. This has nothing to do with personality. It has everything to do with coherence. You are internally aligned, and alignment exposes fragmentation in others. Demons cannot stand coherence. It collapses illusion. It reveals false structures. It makes manipulation visible. That's why they retreat into subtlety, hoping you won't notice the absence of chaos and mistake it for normalcy. But this quiet is not ordinary. It is earned. At this stage, you may feel less dramatic emotion overall, less extreme joy, less deep sorrow, not numbness, emotional equilibrium. This is not detachment from life. It is mastery over internal tides. Demons feed on extremes. When you stop swinging wildly, you starve them. They may attempt one final strategy, reflection through others, triggering reactions indirectly by using people connected to you, old patterns resurfacing in familiar faces, conversations repeating themes you thought were done. This is not regression. This is confirmation that nothing new works, so only echoes remain, and you will notice how quickly those echoes fade. You no longer engage long enough for the pattern to activate. You recognize it instantly. You disengage without guilt. You walk away without explanation. That silence is not avoidance. It is authority. Silence at this level is louder than confrontation. Demons understand confrontation. They are trained for it. They expect defense. They know how to counterattack. What they cannot process is non-engagement paired with unwavering presence. You are not hiding. You are not withdrawing. You are simply unavailable. This is when their attention fractures completely. Monitoring becomes sporadic. Pressure becomes inconsistent. The energy around you lightens, not because the world became safer, but because you became untouchable. Your spiritual structure now operates like a sealed circuit. Energy enters, is neutralized, and exits without residue. There is no accumulation, no build-up, no leak. That's why fatigue no longer lingers the way it used to. You may still get tired, but you recover cleanly. No emotional hangover, no spiritual fog. This is also when intuition sharpens dramatically. Decisions feel immediate. Right and wrong feel obvious. You stop second-guessing yourself because there is nothing pulling you off center. Doubt requires interference. Without interference, certainty becomes natural. Demons sense this certainty even before action is taken. They retreat from future pathways before you arrive. Opportunities align not because they are lucky, but because resistance stepped aside. You are no longer fighting through obstruction. You are moving through cleared space, and here is the truth few ever hear. This state is irreversible. Once coherence stabilizes at this level, it does not collapse, it only deepens. You would have to actively betray your own alignment to fall back, and even then, recovery would be swift. The foundation is set. That is why fear narratives stop resonating with you. Threat-based messages feel hollow. Panic-driven urgency sounds artificial. You can sense when something is designed to provoke rather than inform. Discernment becomes automatic. Demons lose influence not because they are defeated in battle, but because they are rendered irrelevant. They cannot compete with internal order. They cannot overpower self. They cannot infiltrate a system that no longer seeks validation or reaction. You are not fighting darkness. You are outgrowing it. And growth at this level doesn't look dramatic. It looks quiet, stable, grounded. It looks like waking up without dread, moving through challenges without panic, ending days without regret. That is the true sign they failed. In the next section, you will recognize why certain doors close suddenly and permanently once you reach this state, and why nothing truly aligned with your future will ever be lost again. By the time you reach this phase, observation no longer happens from proximity. It happens from a distance, and even that distance is strained. Demons do not linger near what they cannot read, and they cannot read you anymore. What once felt like pressure during rest now feels like silence, not emptiness, but containment. The kind of silence that exists when something dangerous has been sealed away, and the air is finally still. Sleep changes first, not dramatically, not with visions or disturbances, but with depth. You fall asleep faster. you wake up clearer. Dreams no longer carry weight or confusion. They pass like weather instead of carving memory into you. That's because your subconscious is no longer a battleground. It has become protected territory. What once slipped in through exhaustion, doubt, or emotional fatigue no longer finds an opening. Demons relied on your unguarded moments. Not because you were weak, but because you were human. Tired minds loosen filters. Heavy hearts open doors. But now, even in rest, your internal structure remains intact. There is no drop in awareness, no lapse in alignment. You are not defending yourself in sleep. You are simply inaccessible. This is the moment they realize something irreversible has happened. Attempts to influence dreams stop producing results. Emotional residue no longer carries over into mornings. You don't wake up anxious for reasons you can't explain. You don't feel drained without cause. Instead, you rise with neutrality, sometimes even quiet confidence, without knowing why. That is not coincidence. That is protection functioning without your involvement. Demons begin to withdraw their focus because focus costs energy, and you yield none in return. Attention without access is inefficient. Surveillance without leverage is pointless, and manipulation without reaction collapses inward. This is why external chaos may briefly increase, while your internal world grows calmer. The pressure has shifted outward. When demons can't reach the core, they agitate they stir confusion through people, systems, noise, urgency, not to reach you directly, but to see if secondary disruption can draw you back into engagement. It doesn't. You notice the noise without absorbing it. You witness dysfunction without internalizing it. You move through disorder like a steady current through turbulence. The waves break around you, not against you. This is the moment you stop mistaking peace for boredom. Many chosen ones struggle here, not because something is wrong, but because chaos once felt familiar. Intensity once felt like purpose. Conflict once felt like proof of movement. Now, without resistance, life feels quieter, slower, more deliberate, and demons hope you will misinterpret this stillness as stagnation and seek stimulation that lowers your guard. But you don't instead. Clarity replaces adrenaline. Precision replaces urgency. You begin choosing your actions rather than reacting to circumstances. Time stretches. Moments feel fuller. You start noticing details you once overlooked, not because you are hyper-aware, but because your mind is no longer cluttered. This is when discernment matures. You no longer feel pulled to explain yourself. You stop You stop seeking acknowledgement. Your energy no longer leaks into unnecessary conversations, emotional debates, or imaginary futures. You can serve without effort, and conservation strengthens the field around you even more. Demons detect this immediately. A self-contained soul is the most dangerous presence to them. Not aggressive, not loud, but complete. Completeness leaves no seams. This is also when you may notice people drifting away without conflict. Not arguments, not endings, just gradual distance. Some connections dissolve quietly, as if they were never meant to come further. This is not loss. This is filtration. Anything operating on old frequencies cannot remain in proximity to your stabilized state. Attempts to provoke you through nostalgia, guilt, or obligation fail. You remember without reliving. You care without carrying. You acknowledge without engaging. This neutrality is not coldness, is sovereignty. Demons once relied on emotional hooks. Now there is nothing to hook into. They may attempt symbolic gestures, recurring numbers, sudden memories, familiar songs at odd times, not as messages, but as tests. They want to see if meaning still pulls you outward instead of anchoring you inward. When you observe without attachment, the signals stop. The test ends. At this stage, your presence alone alters trajectories. You don't need to intervene. You don't need to advise. You don't need to correct. Simply being aligned causes misaligned structures to either adjust or collapse. That is why some environments improve when you enter, while others subtly push you out. Both outcomes serve the same function. Protection no longer feels like defense. It feels like inevitability. This is when demons finally accept a truth they tried to avoid. They are not facing a threat. They are facing an outcome. You are not becoming something you already arrived. And arrival is final. You may feel a strange sense of detachment from fear-based narratives. Warnings sound exaggerated. Urgent calls feel hollow. Doom no longer motivates you. This is because fear requires uncertainty, and you are no longer uncertain about who you are or where you stand. Your nervous system reflects this. Breathing deepens. Reactions slow. The body trusts the environment, again not because danger vanished, but because your system knows it can handle whatever appears without fragmentation. Demons cannot override embodied confidence. They can't compete with calm authority. They can't disrupt a rhythm that doesn't depend on external validation. This is why they stop appearing in symbolic ways altogether. No more pressured dreams. No more late-night unease. No more unexplained heaviness. The field around you becomes clean, clear, neutral. And neutrality terrifies them, because neutrality means choice. It means you are no longer predictable. You are no longer reactive. You are no longer programmable. You cannot be baited, rushed, or guilted into misalignment. From here on, any interaction with darkness is optional, and optional means powerless. You don't need to fight. You don't need to pray against. You don't need to analyze. You simply live aligned, and alignment does the rest. This is the stage where your future stops being something you chase and starts becoming something that approaches you. Opportunities don't demand effort, they recognize readiness. Paths open not because you pushed, but because resistance withdrew. Demons understand timing, and they know this window has closed. What remains now is refinement, not survival. Expansion, not defense. Awareness, not vigilance. You are no longer guarding your life. You are inhabiting it. And once a chosen one fully inhabits their life, darkness has nowhere left to stand. What unfolds next is quieter than battle, subtler than victory, yet far more decisive. This is the phase where nothing dramatic needs to happen for everything to change. You may even wonder if something is missing, because the absence of resistance can feel unfamiliar. But this absence is not a void. It is space intentional, sacred space created because nothing hostile is permitted to remain. You begin to notice how little effort life requires when you are no longer pushing against unseen opposition. Tasks that once drained you now feel manageable. Decisions that once felt heavy now resolve themselves with surprising ease. Not because circumstances magically improved overnight, but because your internal alignment stopped leaking energy into unnecessary tension. This is when momentum shifts from reactive to generative. Instead of responding to problems, you start initiating outcomes. Instead of bracing for disruption, you begin shaping direction. Your thoughts feel cleaner, less crowded. You don't spiral as easily. When uncertainty appears, it doesn't hijack you. It passes through like information rather than threat. Demons depended on internal noise. Confusion was their camouflage. Doubt was their entry point. But clarity strips them of relevance. They cannot hide where perception is sharp, and they cannot operate where awareness is steady. At this stage, your intuition stops shouting. It doesn't need to. It speaks once, clearly, and you listen. You don't second guess it anymore. You don't ask for signs to confirm what you already know. You trust the first signal because experience has taught you that hesitation only delays. Alignment, this trust in yourself, is not arrogance. It is integration. You have learned your own frequency well enough to recognize when something resonates or repels. And because of this, you move differently through the world. You may notice that certain opportunities appear unexpectedly, without struggle. Not rushed, not forced, simply presented. These are not rewards. They are responses. Life adjusting to match your internal coherence. When you are stable, reality stabilizes around you. Demons do not interfere at this level because interference would require disruption, and disruption would expose them instantly. They retreat into irrelevance rather than risk detection. That is why threats no longer feel personal. They feel distant, abstract, almost theoretical. You also begin to see patterns with new eyes. Not paranoid patterns, but structural ones. You recognize cycles repeating in other people that you have already exited. You see how emotional loops trap those who are still entangled. And instead of feeling superior or burdened, you feel compassionate distance. You no longer need to rescue anyone. This is a critical shift. Many chosen ones were once targeted because of their instinct to save, fix, absorb, or heal at their own expense. Demons exploited this tendency by presenting chaos disguised as responsibility. But now, you understand the difference between support and sacrifice. You can care without carrying. You can witness without intervening. You can love without merging. This boundary is not something you enforce consciously. It exists naturally because your sense of self is no longer porous. You are whole, and wholeness does not require reinforcement. Your rest deepens further, not just sleep, but mental rest. The constant background hum of vigilance disappears. You stop scanning for danger. You stop anticipating disappointment. You stop preparing defenses for conversations that never happen. The nervous system finally believes the message the soul has been sending all along. You are safe to exist as you are. This safety is what allows expansion, creativity returns in unexpected ways. Ideas surface without pressure. You feel drawn to explore, to build, to express, not to prove anything, but because expression feels natural again. Demons despise this stage because creation is evidence of freedom, and freedom cannot be manipulated. You may also experience moments of sudden gratitude, unprompted and quiet. Not excitement, not euphoriage, a deep, steady appreciation for being alive, present, intact. This gratitude is not emotional. It is existential, and it anchors you even more firmly in your body and moment. The body responds by relaxing. Chronic tensions you didn't know you were holding. Shoulders drop, jaw breathing becomes fuller without conscious effort. These are not small changes. They signal that survival mode has ended. Demons cannot operate where survival mode is inactive. They need urgency. They need fear. They need emotional spikes. A regulated nervous system starves them completely. At this point, even memory changes. Past events lose their charge. You can recall difficult moments without reliving them. Trauma no longer defines identity. It becomes information rather than narrative. This is integration at its highest level. You are no longer shaped by what happened to you. You are informed by it, and that distinction changes everything. Interactions with others become simpler. You don't explain yourself as much. You don't argue your perspective.